Hello, welcome to our channel Qubit Educational Services. In this video we are going to talk about the parametric curves. Before we begin, let us quickly go through the contents of this video. The first point that we are going to discuss is why should we study the curves and the surfaces. The second point is specifically regarding the parametric curves, that is, why should we study the curves in the parametric form? What advantages do the parametric forms give when compared to the conventional way of expressing the curves? Then we shall see certain examples of both the planar curves as well as the space curves. We will present the parametric form as well as the conventional form. Then we shall talk about multiple points and what are the curves which have multiple points and the simple curves. Then we shall see two applications of the parametric curves. The first one is to find the tangential direction to the curve, and we will solve some examples based on that. And then in the last part we will see one more application of parametric curves, that is finding the length of the curve with examples. The process of finding length of a curve is also known as rectification. So let us start discussing the parametric curves. So why should we study the curves and the surfaces first of all? First reason, the three big theorems of vector integral calculus, which are the Green's theorem, the Stokes theorem, and the Gauss's divergence theorem, they involve closed curves as well as open and closed surfaces. If you recall the statements of the Green's theorem, it connects a line integral which is taken along a curve which is closed and a surface integral which is taken along a surface in the xy plane. Same applies to Stokes, but in Stokes we remove the restriction that the curve and the surface lie in the xy plane. In the divergence theorem of Gauss, we connect a surface integral and a volume integral. So you can see that in all three theorems, there exists either a surface or a curve or both. Second point, there are tremendous applications of vector calculus in different fields within the science and the applied science, such as the solid mechanics, fluid mechanics, heat transfer where we study the flow of heat energy, electrostatics, quantum physics, and aerodynamics. This list of applications of vector calculus is not exhaustive, mind you. Then we have a whole new field of differential geometry where we apply the techniques of vector calculus to geometry. And this field finds its applications in mechanics, the conventional engineering design as well as the computer aided design, which is known as CAD. It has applications in geodesy, relativity as well as space travel. So you can see that there is a wide array of applications of vector calculus in general and hence that of curves as well as surfaces. Having seen the need to study the curves and the surfaces, now we answer the question, why should we study the curves in their parametric form? The short and simple answer is, the applications show the need. Any curve is typically represented using parametric form as follows. We consider our usual Cartesian coordinate system of 3 dimensions, where the position vector r bar is denoted by xi cap plus yj cap plus zk cap, and the coordinates or positions x, y and z of a point with respect to origin are expressed as functions of a parameter t. So here x is a function of parameter t and so are y and z. So you can say that we are dealing with a mapping from t to the vector x, y, z. The way we define f of t, g of t and h of t decides what type of curve we are going to get. It may give us planar curves like circles, ellipses, parabolas, or even space curves like helix. We will now see the methods to represent a curve which are already known to us. If we consider any two-dimensional curve, we can either represent it as y equal to a function of x, such as y equal to x squared upon 4b, which represents a parabola, or x equal to g of y, such as x equal to y squared upon 4a, or we may use the implicit definition f of x comma y equal to 0. For example, ax squared plus 2hxy plus by squared plus c equal to 0. These are the ways known to us where we can represent the given curve as an equation. When we go to 3 dimensions, the ways to represent the curves are projecting the curve on coordinate planes and representing the curve as an intersection of two surfaces. For example, we recall that whenever any plane intersects a sphere, the cross-section of the two leads to a circle. In other words, to represent a circle in 3 dimensions by this way, we have to specify the equation of the sphere s equal to 0 and equation of the plane p equal to 0. So these two equations collectively represent a circle in 3 dimensions, which is the intersection of the surface of plane and that of sphere. That brings us to the advantages of parametric representation over the conventional ways of representing the curve. The first advantage is that all 3 variables x, y and z have equal role to play. What do I mean by that? If we go back to the definition of a curve in its parametric form, each one of the variables x, y and z is represented as a function of the parameter t. Now this is unlike the way we do it when we represent a curve as a projection. If we project a 3-dimensional curve on the xy plane, we may get a function y equal to f of x, and if we project the same curve on the zx plane, we may represent its projection as z equal to g of x. In other words, y equal to f of x and z equal to g of x are images of the curve, so to speak, on the xy plane and the zx plane respectively. However, instead of studying the images, it is always better to study the curve as a whole. That is the first advantage. The second advantage of parameterization is that it introduces orientation to the curves. Let me remind you that we are studying the curves in the context of vectors. And the prominent feature of vectors is that they have direction. In other words, when you talk about curves, in addition to the vectors, it makes more sense to talk about the direction in which you are traversing the curve. And that is what we mean by orientation of the curves. In these two figures here, I have shown the same curve but with different orientations. If we name the vertices of the curve as A and B, then the first oriented curve is from A to B and the second oriented curve is from B to A. You may use the analogy of a highway connecting two cities. The first curve here represents the direction of the flow of traffic from city A to city B along the road AB. In the second curve, we represent the direction of the traffic which flows from the city B to the city A, and that is what we mean by orientation of the curve. Let us see a few examples to understand the oriented curves better. We consider the circle x squared plus y squared equal to a squared, which is centered at origin and whose radius is equal to a. We now introduce the parameter t in such a way that the equation of the circle becomes r bar equal to a cos t I cap plus a sin t j cap plus 0 k cap, where t is greater than or equal to 0 and less than 2 pi. It is not very difficult to check that this particular equation here indeed represents the circle x squared plus y squared equal to a squared. As we are substituting x as a cos t and y as a sin t, if you square both the sides of these equations and add, we are going to get x squared plus y squared equal to a squared into bracket cos squared t plus sin squared t, which is 1. So we get x squared plus y squared equal to a squared. So in our notations, f of t is a cos t, g of t is a sin t, and h of t is 0, which signifies that our curve lies in the xy plane. Can we represent the circle by using a different parameterization? Yes, we can. We introduce the parameter theta and we define it as -1 into t. So making appropriate changes in the previous definition of circle, we now get the following parameterization: r bar equal to a cos theta I cap minus a sin theta j cap plus 0 k cap. Now how did I get that? If theta is minus t, then t must be minus theta. So cos of t will be cos of minus theta, but as cos is an even function, cos of minus theta will be cos theta. Recall that unlike cos, sin is an odd function. So sin of minus theta will be minus sin theta, and that's the reason why a negative sign exists here. For k component, it doesn't matter because it is 0. Let us now see how different parameterization bring in different orientations. Consider the first parameterization. We will talk about 4 different values of t now: 0, pi by 2, pi, and 3 pi by 2. Let us also locate the points on the xy plane by obtaining their coordinates x and y. When t is 0, f of t will be a, because cos of 0 is 1, and g of t will be 0 because sin 0 is 0. When t is pi by 2, x will be 0 and y will be a. When t is pi, x will be minus a, y will be 0. And when t is 3 pi by 2, then x is 0, but this time y is minus a. In other words, when we start our journey on this circle, we are at this point, whose coordinates are a, 0. Then when t takes the value pi by 2, we reach the point 0, a, which is on the y-axis. For all values of t between 0 and pi by 2, we are in the first quadrant, covering this particular quarter circle. So the direction of the traversing is in anti-clockwise sense, from a, 0 to 0, a. Then if we continue our journey on this circle, when t becomes pi, we reach the point minus a, 0. Then when t is 3 pi by 2, we reach the point 0, minus a. And then we again come back to the initial point a, 0. So when we represent the circle by this equation with parameter t, the orientation of the curve is anti-clockwise. Let us now go to the second parameterization of the same circle, where we have brought in the parameter theta and we have connected theta and t as theta equal to minus t. We'll now prepare a similar table for theta, x and y. When theta is 0, x is a and y is 0. If theta is pi by 2, a cos theta will be 0, so x coordinate will be 0, and minus a sin theta will be minus a. In other words, for theta equal to 0, we were at the point a, 0. But when theta took the value pi by 2, we did not go to the point 0 comma a, we went to the point 0 comma minus a. That is this point. In other words, instead of starting our journey in counterclockwise direction, we started it in the clockwise direction. Currently we are at the point 0 comma minus a. If theta takes the value pi, then x will be a into minus 1, so minus a, and y will be 0. So from 0 comma minus a, we move to the point minus a comma 0 in this orientation. Then let's consider theta as 3 pi by 2. Clearly x will be 0 because of a cos theta. And now for y we will use minus a sin theta. Sin 3 pi by 2 is minus 1, and minus 1 into minus a will be a. So from minus a comma 0 we have reached the point 0 comma a. Now you can clearly see the difference between these two representations. In the second one we started our journey at a comma 0, but we traversed the entire circle in clockwise direction, whereas in the first case the starting point was a comma 0, but we traversed the circle in anti-clockwise direction. And this is what we mean when we say that parametrization introduces orientation to the curves. In the example of the circle, the Cartesian equation was still x squared plus y squared equal to a squared, and this did not raise the question, are we traversing the curve in anti-clockwise direction or clockwise direction? However, with the introduction of two different parameterizations of the same circle, we have got two different oriented curves. Let us now go to the next example, which is the curve helix. Unlike the circle and the line, helix is not contained in a single plane. Hence it is also called as a space curve or a twisted curve. The parametric equation of helix, whose axis is the z-axis, is given by r bar equal to a cos t I cap plus a sin t j cap plus c t k cap, where t is the parameter and the numbers a and c are constants which decide the radius and the pitch of the helix. The x coordinate of any point on the helix is given by a cos t. The y coordinate is a sin t and the z coordinate is ct. So if we decide to project helix on the xy plane, then we will get a circle, because all points on the xy plane have z coordinate 0, so this term will be 0. However, if x is a cos t and y is a sin t, then we have already seen that such a curve represents a circle. If we now project the same helix on the yz plane, whose equation is x equal to 0, then we will get y as a sin t and z as ct. Replacing t by z upon c, we will get y equal to a into sine of z upon c. In other words, to describe the helix otherwise, we will use the projections of helix on the xy plane as well as the yz plane, which will be x squared plus y squared equal to a squared and y equal to a into sine of z upon c. But again, the parametric representation of the helix provides a better understanding than projecting the same curve on the xy and the yz planes respectively. Let us now talk about the constants a and c and their role in the decision of the shape of the helix. A is sort of the radius of the helix and c will tell us the pitch of the helix. Now what is pitch? Pitch represents the distance between 2 points on the helix which have the same x and y coordinate but different z coordinates. If C is positive, we get a right-handed helix, and if C is negative, then we will get a left-handed helix. If you take any right-handed screw, then its threads describe a right-handed helix. The third value which C can take is 0, but if C is 0, then the whole K component will be 0, and then the helix will no longer be a helix, but it will be a circle. We will now describe a family of curves known as simple curves. A simple curve does not intersect itself at multiple points, whose examples are the sine curve, or in fact all trigonometric curves, circle and helix as we have seen earlier. Straight line, ellipse are few more examples of simple curves. Let us now see an example of a curve which is not simple. Its Cartesian equation is x squared equal to 2y squared into 1 minus y squared, and whose parametric representation is r bar equal to sine 2t I cap plus cos t j cap plus 0 k cap. Third component being 0, our curve is going to be in the xy plane. If you trace this curve, then you will get the following shape, which you can see in the figure. For this curve, origin is such a point where the curve is intersecting itself twice. This is one branch of the curve, and this is the second branch of the curve. And as these two branches intersect at origin, this curve is not a simple curve, and origin is also known as a multiple point. Do you recall any other example of a curve which is not a simple curve? I will give you two examples. One of them is Rose curve, and the second one is the Lamniscate. The polar equation of the Lamniscate is r squared equal to a squared cos 2 theta. For a Rose curve, we may consider the equation r equal to a sine n theta or r equal to a cos n theta, where n is any positive integer. Now for Rose curves to have multiple points, we should ensure that n is greater than 1. Because if n is equal to 1, then the Rose curve converts itself to a circle. You may use any grapher to plot the Rose curves as well as the Lamniscate. It so turns out that origin is the multiple point for the Rose curve as well as for the Lamniscate. Having seen the parameterization of curves, we will now see how to find length of a curve and the tangential direction to the curve at any given point when its parametric equation is known. First we will talk about the tangent to the curve, and later we will go to the length of the curve. We consider an oriented curve C and 2 points on this curve, P and Q. Our objective is to find out the tangential direction at the point P. We let the parameter to be t, which describes the curve C, and let the parameter have the value t at P and t plus delta t at Q. O is the origin, so the vector OP bar is r bar and vector OQ bar is r bar plus delta r bar. So the vector PQ bar is delta r bar. The approach that we are following here is similar to what you have already done in 12th standard under the topic application of derivatives to find slope of tangents. We take the vector PQ bar and we multiply it by the scalar 1 upon delta t. We now allow the difference in the parameters to tend to 0. If delta t approaches 0, it means the parameter t plus delta t approaches t, or the point Q here will approach the point P by following the curve C. In the limiting case, the chord PQ of the curve will become the tangent at P. Let's call the tangential direction as T bar. And therefore, T bar is equal to dr bar by dt, which is given by limit as delta t tends to 0, delta r bar upon delta t. If the parametric representation of the curve is f of ti plus g of tj plus h of tk, then the tangential direction will be given by f dash of ti cap plus g dash of tj cap plus h dash of t k cap, where the primes represent the derivatives of respective functions with respect to the parameter t. Let us now solve a couple of examples wherein we will find the tangential direction to the given curve at the given point. We start with the example of helix, whose position vector r bar is given by cos ti cap plus sin tj cap plus 9tk cap. So r bar is cos ti plus sin tj plus 9 into t k. The point P has the coordinates 1, 0 and 18 pi. What will the tangential direction be? It will be dr bar by dt as discussed earlier. So it will be minus sin ti cap plus cos of tj cap plus 9k cap. We still don't know what value the parameter t has at point P, and to find this value we are going to make use of the z coordinate of P, which is 18 pi. According to the parametric equation, the z coordinate is given by 90, which implies that t must be equal to 2 pi. Therefore, the tangential vector at point P will be equal to minus sin 2 pi 0 plus cos 2 pi j cap 1 j cap plus 9 k cap. To find the unit tangent vector t cap P, we are going to divide this vector by its magnitude. So it will be j cap plus 9k cap upon root of 1 plus 81, or that will be j cap plus 9k cap divided by root of 82. If now the question is to find the equation of the tangent line, then we obtain it as follows. We already know the coordinates of the point P. So the numerators of the equation of the line will be x minus 1, y minus 0, z minus 18 pi. We know that in the denominators of these three fractions here, we will substitute 0, 1 and 9, because 0, 1 and 9 are the direction ratios of the tangent. So the equation will be x minus 1 upon 0 equal to y minus 0 upon 1 equal to z minus 18 pi upon 9 equal to some parameter lambda. Let's go to the next example. Here the parametric curve is r bar equal to ti cap plus 4 by t j cap plus 0 k cap. Let's find dr bar by dt to get the tangent vector t bar. It will be equal to I cap minus 4 upon t squared j cap plus 0 k cap. Having obtained the tangent vector, Let's now go to the coordinates of the given point P, which are 4, 1 and 0. So again, this is a planar curve lying in the xy plane. To find the value of the parameter at this point P, we will make use of the x coordinate, which is equal to t. So t is 4. Therefore, t bar at point P will be I cap minus 4 upon 16 j cap plus 0 k cap. Recall that multiplying any vector by a non-zero scalar does not change its direction. So we will multiply this vector by 4, which will give us 4 tp bar as 4i cap minus 1 j cap plus 0 k cap. Therefore, the unit vector tp cap would be 4i minus j upon root of 16 plus 1 or 17. Let us now find out the equation of the tangent line at point P to the given curve. We have x minus 4, y minus 1. There is no need to write z now because z is going to be 0 for all points on the given curve. For x minus 4 we must write 4, and for y minus 1 we must write minus 1, as 4 and minus 1 are the I and the j components of the tangent vector. Let us now go back to the equation and try to recognize the curve. X coordinate is t and y coordinate is 4 upon t. So if you multiply the x and the y coordinate, we will get the following. X into y equal to t into 4 upon t. Tt will get cancelled, so we will get 4. And what does xy equal to 4 represent? It represents rectangular hyperbola. We will verify our answer for this particular situation. Let us first draw the rectangular hyperbola xy equal to 4. Let us also show the point 4, 1, which will be in the first quadrant here. And at last, let us draw the line x minus 4 upon 4 equal to y minus 1 upon minus 1. You can now see that the pink line is indeed a tangent to the rectangular hyperbola xy equal to 4 at the point 4, 1, which verifies our answer. So that completes the second problem. Let us now go to the third one. Find the tangent to the ellipse 1 upon 4x squared plus y squared equal to 1 at point P, whose coordinates are root 2 and 1 upon root 2. So the equation of the ellipse is x squared upon 4 plus y squared upon 1 equal to 1. If we introduce the parametric equations of the ellipse, in the vector form we will get r bar equal to 2 cos theta I cap plus sin theta j cap. Now how to obtain 2 cos theta and sin theta? We simply replace cos squared theta by x squared by 4 and sin squared theta by y squared upon 1, which gives us 2 cos theta and sin theta as x and y respectively. The direction of the tangent vector t bar will now be dr bar by dt, which is minus 2 sin theta I cap plus cos theta j cap. Let us now find the value of the parameter theta from the coordinates of point P. The x coordinate of point P is root 2 and the y coordinate is 1 by root 2. Note that both x and y are positive, so theta must be acute. Now what is y in terms of the parameter theta? It is sin theta. So if y is sin theta and in the current situation it is 1 by root 2, then theta must be equal to pi by 4. Therefore, t bar at the given point P will be equal to minus 2 into sine pi by 4, which is 1 by root 2. So it will be minus root 2 I cap plus 1 upon root 2 j cap. Let's now find equation of the tangent to the ellipse, which will be x minus root 2 upon minus root 2 equal to y minus 1 upon root 2 upon 1 upon root 2. Again, there is no need to write the z component because the ellipse entirely lies in the xy plane. So we have successfully obtained the tangent vector at the given point as well as equation of the tangent line at the given point. And as we did in the previous example, let us verify our result graphically. In this figure here, you can see the green colored ellipse whose equation is x squared by 4 plus y squared equal to 1. Let us locate the point P whose coordinates are root 2 and 1 upon root 2. Let us now go to the line x minus root 2 upon minus root 2 equal to y minus 1 upon root 2 upon 1 upon root 2, which we obtained in the solution. If you plot it, it will be this blue line, and as you can see, it is indeed the tangent to the given ellipse at the given point P, root 2 comma 1 upon root 2, which verifies our answer. Let us now see the last part of this video, that is finding length of the given curve whose parametric equation is r bar equal to f of t I cap plus g of t j cap plus h of t k cap. T is the parameter here. In this section, we will develop an approach and a formula to find the length of the curve. Let us consider this pink curve here, whose starting point is A and whose end point is B. Let us divide the curve into 4 parts: A0 to A1, A1 to A2, A2 to A3, and then finally A3 to A4. So on division of the curve into 4 parts, the point A4 will be B and the point A0 will be A. Now how can we develop an expression for the approximate length of the curve? We can do it by considering the straight line or the Euclidean distance between points A0 and A1, A1 and A2, A2 and A3, and A3 and A4. Let us call these lengths as L1, L2, L3 and L4 respectively. So the approximate length of the curve using the summation notation will be summation Lj, as j runs from 1 to 4. Note that length of the jth segment Lj is nothing but the norm or the magnitude of the vector aj minus 1 aj bar. For example, if we consider the segment a1 a2, then L2 will be equal to the magnitude or length of the vector a1 a2 bar. If we now let the coordinates of point A1 as x1, y1, z1 and coordinates of A2 as x2, y2, z2, then the magnitude can be calculated by the distance formula, which will give us L2 as root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared plus z2 minus z1 squared. You might be knowing this formula already. We are not going to perform a very crucial step here. We are going to multiply and divide L2 by the expression T2 minus T1. If we do that, we'll get the following: root of x2 minus x1 upon T2 minus T1 squared plus y2 minus y1 upon T2 minus T1 the whole squared plus z2 minus z1 upon T2 minus T1 the whole squared into T2 minus T1. Just like we have developed the expression for L2, in general we can do it for Lj. Now, the approximation of the length of the curve by these 4 segments is a very crude approximation. So it makes more sense to increase the number of partitions on the curve. If n denotes the number of such segments or partitions, in our case n is 4. As n increases under the condition that all these lengths tend to 0, let's call Lj tends to 0, then we will go on getting better and better approximations for the length of the curve. In other words, instead of taking 4 such segments, if we take 40, 400, 4000, 40,000 and so on, we'll go on getting better and better approximations to the length of the curve. And in the limiting case, we have the following. Length of the curve equals limit as n tends to infinity, but more importantly, the norm of delta Tj tends to 0. Now what do we mean by norm? Note that we have the points a0, a1, a2, so on till an, and by joining these points by straight line segments, we have partitioned the curve. At each point, we have a value for the parameter t. Tn. We now consider the differences in successive values of t. So delta t1 will be t1 minus t0, delta t2 will be t2 minus t1, and so on and so forth. Out of all these values of delta t's, we consider the largest, and it is that value which is known as the norm. If you are familiar with the Riemann sum and the corresponding integration process, then you will immediately recognize that we are doing the exactly same thing. By letting the norm or the largest value of delta t to tend to 0, we are ensuring that all the smaller values or all the remaining values of delta t also tend to 0. So the length of the curve will be equal to limit as norm of delta Tj tends to 0 or n tends to infinity, summation j goes from 1 to n, root of delta xj upon delta Tj squared plus delta yj upon delta Tj squared plus delta zj upon delta Tj squared into delta Tj. So this is the generalization of this expression here. Here we did it for L2. Now we are generalizing it to Lj and allowing the number of such segments to tend to infinity. In other words, T2 minus T1 will represent delta T2 as already discussed here. X2 minus X1 will be delta X2. Y2 minus Y1 will be delta Y2. And similarly, Z2 minus Z1 will be delta Z2. If we collect the deltas for x, y and z and t, if we put them in this expression, take the sum and finally take limit of the sum, then we will get the definite integral. T0 denotes the value of the parameter t at the starting point of integration, that is point A, and Tn denotes the value of the parameter t at the end point of the curve, which is B. Using the definition of derivative as limit, these three ratios will correspond to dx by dt, dy by dt and dz by dt respectively. And therefore, we have got the expression for the length of the curve as a definite integral of root of dx by dt squared plus dy by dt squared plus dz by dt squared dt. Now there are some alternate representations for the same expression here. We will see them one by one. The first one is integral from t0 to tn, root of the dot product of r dash bar with r dash bar. Now what is r dash bar? We have already seen that if r bar is xi plus yj plus zk, then dr bar by dt gives us the tangent vector t bar. And this t bar is being denoted by the vector r dash bar in this case. Clearly, if we take the dot product of r dash bar with r dash bar itself, all that we are required to do is take each component of r dash bar, multiply it by the same thing and take the square. In short, to find the dot product of r dash bar with r dash bar, we are going to multiply the I component of r dash bar by I component of r dash bar, plus same thing for the j and the k components respectively. So it is the same expression here inside the radical sign. In the vector form it becomes r dash bar dot r dash bar. The second representation of length of the curve is integral from t0 to tn 1 ds, where ds denotes the elementary arc length. Now what is elementary arc length? We go back to this figure for a moment. As we discussed, if n tends to infinity and Lj, that is length of each individual line segment, tends to 0, then the straight line seems to provide better and better approximation to the curved line. So we can say that in the limiting case, the distance between any two consecutive points can be said to be the elementary arc length ds. If we keep on adding the elementary arc lengths, ultimately we will get the length of the curve. Let's now go back to this particular expression for a moment. Let me write 1 here. Then the entire expression here, including dt, corresponds to the elementary arc length ds. Let's now see few examples in which we will be finding the arc lengths or perimeters of the curves. Find the length and sketch the curve for the following cases. First one, circular helix r bar t, which is 4 cos t I cap plus 4 sin t j cap plus 5 t k cap from 4 0 0, which is the point on x-axis, to 4 0 10 pi. In this case, x is 4 cos t, y is 4 sin t, and z is equal to 5t. Let's now find the values of the parameter t for the starting point and the end point. We can make use of either of the three coordinates, but I will prefer the z coordinate as it will not lead to infinitely many solutions, unlike cos t and sin t. The starting point is 4 0 0, so the z coordinate is 0, equal to 5t, which implies that t is 0. This gives us the lower limit of the definite integral. Let us now go to the second point, which is 4 0 10 pi. Therefore 10 pi equals 5t, which implies that t is equal to 2 pi. So we have now got the upper limit on t. We now go back to the formula which we have derived. This one. According to this formula, the integrand is root of dx by dt squared plus dy by dt squared plus dz by dt squared dt, with t0 and tn being the values of the parameter d at the starting point and at the end point of the curve. Therefore, length of the curve will be the definite integral from 0 to 2 pi of root of square of dx by dt. X is 4 cos t, the derivative of x will be minus 4 sin t. If we square it, then we will get 16 sin squared t, plus square of dy by dt, which will be 16 cos squared t, plus square of dz by dt, Z is 5d, so dz by dt will be 5. So square of that will be 25 dt equal to. We now know that sine squared t plus cos squared t will be 1. So we have root of 16 plus 25, which is root of 41. That being a constant, let's take it outside. Integral 0 to 2 pi 1 dt, which is equal to root of 41 into 2 pi. Integral of 1 is t. On substituting the upper and the lower limits and subtracting, we will get root of 41 into 2 pi units. So this is the length of the circular helix from 400 to 4010 pi. Let us now go to the second curve, that is circle. Well, we already know the formula for circumference of a circle, so we can verify our answer very easy. This circle lies in the xy plane because there is no z coordinate here. The starting point is a, 0 and the end point is 0, a. X is given by a cos t and y is given by a sin t. The starting point is a, 0. So if we write a here, then we will get t at 0. The end point is 0, a. If we now substitute x at 0 here, then t will be equal to pi by 2. This gives us the limits on t. Therefore, the length will be equal to 0 to pi by 2 root of dx by dt squared, which will be a squared sine squared t, plus dy by dt squared, which will be a squared cos squared t dt equal to, again we have sine squared t plus cos squared t, which is 1. So root of a squared will be a into integral 0 to pi by 2 1 dt, which will be equal to a into pi by 2 units. Recall that a, 0 lies on x-axis and 0, a lies on y-axis. More importantly, these 2 points lie on the positive x and the positive y-axis respectively. So to find the length of circular arc from a, 0 to 0, a is as good as finding length of the quarter circle of the circle. We already know that length of full circle is given by 2 pi r. So to find the length of quarter circle, we should divide it by 4, which will give us pi a by 2. And it is the same answer that we have got here, which verifies our result. So that concludes our video on parametrization of curves. In the next video, we will talk about parametrization of surfaces.